Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the second session of the educational series on our Race to Resilience initiative to form transformational resilience coordinating networks throughout North America and worldwide for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. And I want to, as before, I just want to give many thanks to our co-sponsors of this initiative, including the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative, but also Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, which is hosting this webinar, and Jesse Kohler, who's their executive director, Trauma-Informed Oregon, Christian, who are on here, or who are, of course, members of our staff, if you will, helping, and a whole bunch of other organizations that you see listed there. The key message I want to share today, as I shared last week, and I just hope you all remember, is that community is medicine. That's especially true for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. And throughout human history, our ability as people to band together, cooperate, has always been key to providing the mutual aid and emotional support people need to help others survive, remain healthy and resilient during crisis, and solve complex problems. And by organizing what we call transformational resilience coordinated networks in neighborhoods and urban areas and small-sized communities all over the world, we can do this again now for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. So just a quick summary of last week's session for those of you who weren't able to be there. That the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis is a rapidly accelerating event that in different times, in different ways, and in different magnitudes are going to severely stress or traumatize everyone in every nation. And this means, let me step back and say that this means it's a population level problem. This is not just about vulnerable populations, vulnerable people, although they must be given extra care by all means because they are greatly affected, but everyone's going to be affected. So this means we have two urgent tasks that we have to address. The first is to build the horizontal social infrastructure in communities and in neighborhoods, connecting organizations and individuals together that engages residents in providing the mutual aid and emotional support people need to survive and remain healthy and resilient during the long climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis, so to help them deal with the disasters and the stresses, and also help people use those adversities to find new meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life, and continue to thrive as these disasters and stresses occur. But that's got to be linked with motivating residents to do their part to reduce the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis to manageable levels and greatly enhance local ecological, economic, and social conditions. This means engaging residents in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and strengthening external physical infrastructure for disasters, et cetera, and restoring and regenerating the natural environment. And what we have seen is that transformational resilience coordinating networks are the most effective way to build and sustain this social infrastructure and implement the strategies needed to accomplish those two urgent tasks. So today we're going to focus in on how the transformational resilience coordinating networks, let me say again, communities should use whatever term they want for this. It's a multi-sectoral network of individuals, organizations, groups, et cetera. But how they can use a public health approach to develop strategies that strengthen the 5 foundational protective factors, and I'm going to explain what that means, needed to build population-level mental wellness and transformation resilience for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. Before we get going, I want to also say that a week from this Thursday, on Thursday, February 13th, we're going to hold an open session. We've done this a number of times in the past, and they've been people have been very happy that we did this. It's going to be at the same time as this session and last week's session, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And then you figure out your own time for that. But there's no agenda. We're not going to make a presentation. Instead, any of you who want to attend, come on, and you get to meet others, ask questions, problem solve, discuss issues. So we'll all just have a chance to talk and share things. We don't have that time this week or last week, given the material we wanted to present. But in a week from this Thursday, the 13th, save that date if you're interested in just having a conversation about these, coming with all the questions you have, etc. So let's just do a resilience pause before we get going too far. And resilience pause is something that you can practice on your own, and you can help people in your Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network learn how to practice. And it's a way to calm the body, mind, emotions, and behaviors during distresses. And this time we're going to practice the control test, which is really a method of self-care. So before you worry about something or take action on something, you always can try to run what you're going to do through a basic test to determine what you can control and what you cannot control, and then focus on what you can control. Here's the thing, the only things you can actually control are your own character, how you see the world, how you live your life, your actions and reactions to things, how you respond to what's happening, and how you treat others, your direct behaviors and your subtle behaviors. Things we can control, for example, are our opinions, are what we pursue, our desires, aversions, words, reactions, behaviors. Things we cannot control are what others say about us, what others do, the weather, our property values, the value of our money, etc. So I want you just to take a moment and identify something that you are worried about now or distressed about right now. It could be something small. Oh, I forgot to get something, for work yesterday or today. Or it could be something larger than that, a relationship issue, or concerned about your kids or whatever. Just try to identify one thing. And then ask yourself, is this something within your control? Is this something related to your own character, your actions or reactions, or how you treat others? Or is it not related to one of those factors and therefore not within your control? If the answer is yes, what you're concerned about is within your control, then you can take action. Talk about that in a second. But if the answer is no, it is not within your control, then don't harm yourself with a second arrow, as it's called. So the world always has lots of adversities, lots of difficult times for humans. That's just the way life is. And we do get distressed about that. We have reactions to it, but we often then shoot ourselves with a second arrow, which is really harming ourselves through emotional reactions, behavior reactions, etc. That makes things worse. So we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. Even though those things are not within your control. So that's what's really important on identifying, am I shooting myself with a second arrow or not? And after making the choice, use the skylight method to observe what you experience. Meaning when I said, yes, this is in my control, or no, actually, it's not something I can control. So I'm not going to shoot a second arrow into myself. You can use the skylight method, which is to imagine yourself sitting in a room, but your other self is on the roof looking down through a skylight at yourself, and just observe what you experience in yourself sitting there. Do your emotions change? Do your behaviors change? Are you thinking about something different? Once you realize what's in your control that you can take action at, and what's not in control that you shouldn't take action on. So this is a very powerful way to address this. And so how does this relate to the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis? The control test can empower you to be a person of action, because by focusing on what you can control, which is basically yourself, you can maintain personal wellness and resilience. You can avoid that second arrow that you shoot into yourself, and you can put your energy where you can create the most meaningful change. So in short, the control test helps making decision-making and emotional investment easier to manage, helps you not harm yourself or harm others or even harm the natural environment, fretting about things that you cannot control. And the control test is very liberating in that sense. It helps you sort of address those two issues. And transformational resilience coordinating networks, TRCNs, can help all adults and youth learn age and culturally appropriate ways to use the control test. Can be a very, very important, powerful tool. So just to get going, I want to do some breakout rooms. These are just going to be 5-minute breakout rooms, just so you get to meet other people. Well, there'll be 3 to 5 people. Just introduce yourself, briefly share one thing that makes you laugh, which is really important in today's day and age. And then as a group, maybe discuss how the control test, how you can apply the control test to your work or to yourself or your family. And if you have time at the end, designate someone to post something in chat that other people can read about what happened during the session. So I'm going to turn it over to Jesse. He's going to break you up into breakout rooms. So just a brief time just to get to meet other people and talk a little bit. So Jesse?
Appreciate it, Bob. Opening up the breakout rooms now. If anybody has any problems, we'll be in the main room to get you, but we'll see you back here in 5 minutes.
Wow, is that right? Great. Well, I hope I know it was very brief, but I hope you had a chance to meet some folks and just share a little bit. And anything that your group, anybody actually wants to post in chat, takeaways, something like that, that would be helpful. Please go ahead and do that. Feel free to do that. So last week we talked about how to form a transformational resilience coordinating network, how to organize a steering committee. And we didn't get that into it, but with a mission and vision of success. But that means, talking to your neighbors, talking to your colleagues, and trying to form a small committee, planning committee that creates its own vision and a way to describe it to others, and then they keep expanding outward. And today we're going to talk about how that group, once you have a steering committee is formed, can really begin to build the capacity of the community for mental wellness and what we call transformational resilience. So we're going to go into more depth here. But before we do that, just I want to I'll offer a few other comments. First of all, the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis really requires us to redefine what we mean by mental health and psychosocial problems. Not getting this to work. There we go. What appears as mental health and psychosocial problems are usually coping mechanisms, self-protective survival reactions gone wrong. People start to do certain things as a reaction to the stresses or traumas they experience because they think that'll help them deal with it. But then as those patterns exist, they end up harming themselves, harming other people. When acute traumas and toxic stresses are continuous or overwhelming, the mind often cannot distinguish between false and real threats, and so remains in a state of hyperinflated fear. And this can cause people to fail to consider healthy options, or even when they adopt something that's not very healthy, to consider how to get back to healthy options. And instead, they adopt coping mechanisms, again, that harm themselves, other people, or the natural environment. We see that up where I live in Oregon, the US, where people are just cutting down trees everywhere because they're fearful of wildfire. And of course, that's drying out the soils, reducing the capacity for sequestration of carbon, making things worse. And the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is the perfect storm for this kind of reaction. Because when cascading breakdowns to the systems people rely on for basic needs, food, water, shelter, health, safety, etc., are mixed with more frequent, prolonged, and catastrophic disasters, which is what we're seeing, the stresses and traumas that result can activate all sorts of maladaptive coping mechanisms that harm the individual themselves, their family, organizations, or entire communities and societies. So one way to start this, to address these challenges, you have a resilience network organized in your community, even if it's in the nascent state, the early state. You can begin building population-level mental wellness and transformational resilience by helping traumatized residents begin to heal their trauma. This really involves organizing trauma healing gatherings. And we work with many organizations that do this very kind of work. So they get groups of 5 to 100 people together who share what they're experiencing and hear what others are experiencing and how they're dealing with it in a safe, non-judgmental, and non-clinical setting, usually facilitated by peers, trained peers. Once they have a chance to share that, they hear from others. First of all, they're developing some camaraderie, some connection. They realize, oh, I'm not alone. There's nothing wrong with me per se. Other people are experiencing the same thing. Then these healing gatherings tend to help people learn age and culturally appropriate presencing and purposing resilience skills. Presencing meaning self-regulation and co-regulation. Purposing means how do I find meaning, purpose, and hope in this adversity that help them begin to heal. But it also helps them establish social connections and builds community support and efficacy. So some examples, the Trauma Resource Institute's community resilience model the Trauma Resource Institute goes around the world helping communities engage in these kind of practices. They're in the Ukraine now. We're just talking with our group during the breakout that I just did a session for them with LA wildfire victims and others. But also the Center for Mind-Body Medicine is another integrative community therapy, which came out of Brazil, working in the favelas in Brazil, but now is going to many other countries, is another approach. And there are others. So there's some examples. So think about that. Could you right now organize a trauma healing event like this, bring in one of these groups or some other group to facilitate it? And then they usually train people who have gone through these experiences and how to facilitate other experiences. Another ways Transformational Resilience Coordinating Networks can begin their work is to start with a conference, depending if that makes sense in your community. So you invite all residents, groups, and organizations to hear from speakers who offer a vision of how their community can come together, enhance resilience to prevent and heal traumas. And they involve people some exercises to give them a sense. A good example is the rural community up in Oregon, where I live in the US, of the Dalles, Oregon. The school teachers realized that the kids were traumatized. There was a lot of violence going on and other problems. They organized a conference. They brought in Dr. Sandy Bloom, who created the sanctuary model. She shared that, and it launched a pretty significant program in their community. And still another very powerful way that Transformational Resilience Coordinators can get going is to actively engage residents in identifying and mapping protective factors, which are often called assets. So this is called asset mapping. But what you're really doing is mapping protective factors. And those protective factors are social connections. Where are there good, strong connections between people and communities? And what populations, what sectors of the community don't have those strong connected factors? But individual and collective resilience skills, local norms, habits, resources, and other assets that residents believe help them prevent and heal psychological, social, emotional problems and support wellness and resilience. And asset mapping or protective factor acting, I like the term asset mapping better, actively engages residents in these activities. It's not done by some nonprofit or government agency on their own. Residents are engaged through a strength-based wellness and resilience lens. And this is usually done before a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network finalizes its strategies, because the information that emerges will shed light on what those strategies should look like. So here's just a sample asset map. This DePaul University ABCD Institute has this and has a lot more on this. You identify what institutions might help up at the left side, individuals who has good skills, who can reach out to people that are going to the right, physical spaces, the local economic sources, strength stories and narratives in the community that can help, associations. And you just ask residents to identify all those, who helps you, what organization can help you, what factors in the community help prevent and heal these kind of experiences. And then you actually can map them, put them on a map. So, well, this organization is here on 3rd and Broadway. This one over here is on this place is a mile away. And then people can see, oh, here's some assets, and see which populations, which neighborhoods, just don't have any assets or have very few of them. The benefits of doing this kind of process is that after you identify all these protective factors or assets, the social connections, resilience skills, et cetera, residents are more able to envision how to use them and how to form additional ones because they see gaps, they see there's no resources. And those, so with the focus on what kind of assets or protective factors do we need to address immediate needs, help people survive crisis and disasters, to support wellness and resilience, what kind of protective factors do we need for disasters or stresses related to the climate emergency, et cetera. And it can be a very, very powerful process. It does take some resources and some time, but it's just another way you can get going. What's important here is to remember that identifying and building on assets has far greater impact than the common approach of trying to fix deficits, eliminate risks, or treat symptoms. And once an asset map is developed, you can then use that information to develop a community resilience portrait. You put it all together and you describe the protective factors that exist and the other ones that are needed. And you can send that document out, let everybody in the community have it. But a written document is not essential because even more important is to use the process to build social connections, bring people together to talk about those issues. They get to know each other. You're building those social connections, which, as I'll talk about in a second, are vital for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this work. Each community should use its method that makes sense to them, given their demographics, culture, resources. Maybe you start with just one neighborhood and just get a few people together and see how that goes. But also you learn how to do this better. And there's lots of resources that you could read and learn from to get trained in how to run this kind of process. And then you go and you broaden it out if you find it successful. But Transformational Resilience Coordinating Networks can use this information to craft their public health strategies to build population-level mental wellness and transformational resilience for the climate emergency. So what does this mean? We talked about this in the larger webinar, but a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience works at the population level and focuses on improving the health and well-being of a community through large-scale prevention and healing programs. It uses both multidisciplinary approaches, meaning many different focuses elements are involved, not just certain approaches to mental health, but lots of different approaches, and multi-systemic approaches, meaning there's lots of different stressors that people are experiencing because of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. So you want strategies to address all of those stresses. They have to be multi-systemic. And this requires input from many people, grassroots and neighborhood leaders, faith leaders, youth, health, education, disaster, mental health, human services, and many others. Again, depending on the nature of your community, the nonprofit, public, and private sector there. And a public health approach to mental wellness and resilience has 4 main focuses. First, you identify the issues you want to address. Then you identify the protective factors and sometimes the risk factors that undermine protective factors. But as I said, when you actually focus on that, that can end up being never ending. You can identify one risk factor after the next. But when you just build 1 or 2 protective factors, they sometimes just completely nullify many risk factors. And then you develop strategies to strengthen the protective factors, you implement it, and continually evaluate and improve those strategies. So a public health approach differs substantially from the direct mental health and human services approach, which focus on treating individuals after they experience issues and responding to the next crisis. Those are both going to be important, but that's not the dominant focus here. They support this public health approach. They are not the dominant or the only focus. So here's an analogy of the value of a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience. In the 19th century, 100 years ago, a little over that, strategies to prevent disease by cleaning up sewer systems and water supplies were found to be far more effective than all the doctors and medical treatments in the world were in addressing the diseases that polluted sewer systems and water supplies were creating. Initially, the focus was just, well, we need more treatment. We need more treatment. But then they actually said, wait, let's go clean up the source of the issues. Let's get this sewer system out of the roads, where that's often where it happened, and clean up the water supplies. And wow, a lot of the diseases went away. And we now need to address all aspects of the quote unquote sewer system. Sorry for that analogy, but that are causing today's social, psychological, emotional, behavioral problems and clean them up, so to speak. So it's important to realize that we all have a basic need for meaning and purpose in our lives. That's a driving force within all people, really. And that's really at the core of a public health approach. How do you address that? There's really 5 basic ways research has found, and think about your own life, you probably find this, that you find meaning and purpose. First is what we just discussed, focusing on what is within your control, but keeping the big picture in mind with your strong vision and energy focused on that big vision. People find meaning and purpose by regulating their mood, by developing and fostering positive social supports and relationships, through engagement in concrete tasks that provide tangible ways to engage in something larger than yourself and feel an accomplishment. That we find meaning and purpose when we're doing something that's beyond just our own personal needs, helping something larger than ourselves and seeing some success in that. In doing that, we often are able to build social connections. We're often able to regulate our mood better and therefore just determine what's within our control and what's not. So these are all interconnected. And also by using tragedy, disasters, et cetera, as lessons to grow and find more honest and constructive ways to perceive and engage in the world. This is well researched. This is called, you could call it adversity growth or post-traumatic growth. That's what we mean by transformational resilience. We thought the term adversity-based growth was too wonky, so we came up with transformational resilience. But it's how do we use these adversities as lessons to find more honest and constructive ways to perceive and engage in the world. And our research that we kicked off a number of years back, looking around the world for the best ways to address the traumas and stresses generated by the climate-ecosystem-biodiversity crisis, we identified 5 core foundational protective factors that are going to really be vital to do this. And they all address these 5 basic ways humans have of finding meaning and purpose in life. So the first one is, and I'm going to go into this a little more depth than what I've talked about already, is building social connections across boundaries in the community. That's vital. I'll come back to that in a second. But connected to these, and I'm going to read these linearly, but they're all interconnected, is ensure a just transition by creating supportive physical, built, economic, and ecological conditions. What this means is that helping residents build safe, healthy, just, climate resilient infrastructure in their community, transportation systems, housing, open space, et cetera, but also creating family wage jobs that are low emission or no emission, and also regenerating local conditions. What we have seen, and there's many projects and organizations doing this work, when they engage residents in that, it builds hope. They see progress. It helps with mental health issues, prevent mental health issues. And related to that is to develop mental wellness and resilience literacy, widespread literacy. What this means is, again, help everyone in age and culturally appropriate ways understand how traumas and toxic stresses can affect their body, mind, emotion, behaviors, those fight, flight, freeze, and fawn reactions that can cause them to adopt maladaptive coping mechanisms, and then learn resilience skills to calm their body, mind, and emotion, what we call presencing and purposing skills, but also help people understand how stresses can affect groups, the thinking and behavior of groups. So when you see groups doing weird things, you go, oh, I get it. They're lots of stressed people. They're traumatized people. Gives you a different way to respond. Just as importantly, the 4th protective factor that we identified is to engage residents continually in practices that promote mental wellness and resilience, especially during adversities. One is to find ways to help residents laugh a lot. I know that sounds funny, but that's so important. It releases the trauma in our nervous system. But how to be compassionate with others, how to practice forgiveness for ourselves, because we're going to do things that aren't that helpful, and others that do the same thing. And there's some others of those. And finally is what we just talked about to establish these ongoing healing gatherings to heal trauma and suffering. So all 5 of those are really, really important for the specifically focused on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. So I want to just ask you a question. When do you feel happiest, most fulfilled, and find the most meaning in your life? Think about that and put some comments in chat. Just take a second, think about it. When do you feel happiest, most fulfilled, and find the most meaning in life? Put your, what comes up when I ask that? Anybody who's willing, just put your comments in chat. So as you do that and think about that, how much is your happiness and fulfillment and meaning depend on connections with others or helping others? And put that in chat also if you're willing. What makes you the most happiest, and does your happiness and fulfillment, sense of meaning in the world really depend on or relate to connections you have with others or helping others? So we'll come back and read some of those later. You could read them too. It's really important that what most people find is that social connections are at the core of their life. It's key to your own happiness and well-being, and it's key to helping others, because by helping others, you often find happiness yourself and find meaning. And yet today, social isolation and loneliness are profound drivers of mental health and psychosocial problems. The research is clear. I'm sure you all know in your life and the work you do that more and more people have no one to help them and no one to confide in during a disaster or during a mental health, family abuse, economic, or other struggles. Social media has really aggravated that problem, not helped with it. And there's many other factors involved with that. And social isolation and loneliness produce anxiety, depression, PTSD, increased suicidality, and more. And lack of social connections and loneliness can also lead to a loss of self-worth, a loss of meaning and purpose in life, which, as we said, are essential human needs. And loneliness also, turns out, inhibits the immune system, which promotes inflammation, aggravates the stress response all over, and makes things twice as harmful to both mental health and physical health as they would be if you didn't have that loneliness. And it affects things like obesity and greater risk of premature mortality. The flip side is that social connections prevent mental health and psychosocial problems and strengthen physical health and increase the chances of longevity by about half. People who feel connected to others have lower rates of anxiety and depression. They have higher self-esteem and more empathy for others. And they tend to be more trusting and cooperative, which makes others more open and trusting and cooperative of them. In other words, strong social connection generates a positive feedback that enhances social, psychological, emotional, and physical wellness. And those social connections are vital during the increasingly extreme and prolonged disasters and stresses we're experiencing, especially during the first 1 to 5 days, and often far longer of a disaster. Your survival, your health, and the health of others largely depends on friends and neighbors, not emergency responders. And in many places, there are no emergency responders. They're also key to providing the mutual aid that helps people move to safe, healthy places, obtain food, water, shelter, power, et cetera, and other basic needs. And they provide people with a vital sense of safety and emotional support. Oh, Sally's here. I feel better. I feel safe now. We can deal with this. And throughout human history, it is the relationships people have with others that have been the most critical for survival during crisis, because they set the foundation for neighboring, for mutual aid, and emotional support. And when people, as we talked about, rise above their own self-interest and provide mutual aid and emotional support to others, they often find much more meaning and purpose in their own lives. And this is why enhancing social connections in your community is by far the most important protective factors Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network should focus on to build population-level mental wellness and resilience for the climate climate-ecosystem biodiversity crisis. Here's one way to think about the social connections. There's many ways to do it, but you could think about helping your transformation resilience coordinator creating bonding social support networks, bridging and linking social support networks. Bonding social support networks are connections between friends, families, and neighbors who have close bonds together. They share some of their life with each other, help each other out. Bridging social support networks are bridges between different bonding networks. So you've got your 5 or 6 or 3, whatever bonding network, and then you start to be connected with one across town that you'd like to. So you share information with, you start to help each other out. And the difference between that bonding and bridging network is you might not share personal details of your life with the other people in the other bonding network, but you're connected, you're bridged. And linking social support networks are links between those bonding and bridging networks and people and organizations in your community that have resources, food, water, shelter during a disaster, or who have economic or political power and can get something done. So they call bonding networks strong ties, bridging networks weak ties, and linking networks weak ties. But all are important because there's strong ties weak ties are just as important as strong ties. So that's what building social support networks is about. Social connections across boundaries in the communities. There are many organizations doing this in very fun way. Abundant Community Edmonton in Edmonton, Canada actually has a climate neighboring program underway now. I would encourage you to look them up. There's many others. Some big cities have got engaged in this. The city of San Francisco in the US has done this, where they actually shut down roads in the middle of town and have potlucks and invite people out from their high rises. They sit at the table, they share food, they get to know each other, and they build those connections. There's many different ways. But again, just as importantly, engage residents in that just transition that we're going to have to make to deal with the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. Engage residents in restoring local forests, watersheds, wetlands, et cetera. And in doing that, you not only build those conditions, they see things improve, but they build social support networks. And help while they're doing that, you help people learn how trauma and toxic stress can affect them and affect other people, and learn some skills to calm their body, mind, emotions, and behaviors, et cetera, and engage them. So let's find a way to laugh before we go out and restore this local watershed or this local forest. Let's do some joking around, or let's just practice compassion for others that might not be doing this kind of work. And then if people are still traumatized, try to organize those ongoing events of 5 to 100 people, whatever, trained by peers, run by peers who can help people share what they're going through. And to do that, you can use an adaptive management approach, develop strategies that implement these approaches. And adaptive management means you start by choosing your desired outcome. So following up on what we're talking about social connections, you say, our outcome is for everyone in our community within 3 years or whatever to have at least one person they can count on for practical assistance and emotional support. Then you collect information. How many people in this neighborhood we're going to work in do not have one social support? Where do they reside, et cetera? How many do have that? Then you establish strategies. Okay, we're going to build that some collection. We're going to hold a potluck to help people meet, or we're going to organize other types of events, age and culturally appropriate events that allow people to meet and get to know each other. And you make that a regular ongoing thing. Then you implement your strategy. Okay, we recruit and train people to organize and run the potlucks, or to organize these events and provide food and transportation to the event, to encourage people to attend. Let's all go out and help plant seedlings to restore this forest. Okay, we're going to provide you with lunch and some transportation. Meet us here. We'll take a bus out there, et cetera. So you implement the strategies, but you also regularly evaluate and assess the outcomes. In let's say in a year, how many people have developed a new social support node that they can count on for assistance and emotional support? How many did not? And then you continually learn, adapt, and improve when things don't go as planned. Well, this didn't really connect people long enough. Somehow we didn't know how to do that. So we didn't have many people that developed the connections with at least one other person. Let's try this instead to do that. So you just keep learning, you keep adapting. And this is, by the way, where researchers can really help this evaluation process. So let's spend now about 8 minutes in breakout rooms, a little bit longer this time. And just, again, share your name, where you're from, and share what you've gained so far from what we've heard today, or if you participated in last week's session in both of those. And just sort of brainstorm and discuss how you might be able to implement similar approaches in your community or neighborhood. And if you can't see it happening, sort of point that out and maybe give the other person some feedback. Well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Just have a discussion. How can you begin to build population level mental wellness and resilience in your community? And at the close of the section, we'll have time for a brief kind of conversation, but put questions or comments in chat. So Jesse, I'm going to turn it back over to you for about an 8-minute breakout room.
Appreciate it, Bob. We'll open up the breakout rooms. You'll be able to see the timer up in the top right of your screen so that hopefully you're not surprised as the 8 minutes goes by quickly. Then you'll have 30 seconds before the breakout rooms completely close you out. But open in the breakout rooms now. Looking forward to seeing you all in a bit.
So if you have any, I hope you had a good breakout room. You can chat a little bit. Again, these are not long, so it's often hard to get deep into anything. But if anybody has any particular issues that came up or points that want to make, et cetera, can you very briefly post them in chat? And Christian will just read a few, and then we'll close out the session. Christian, anything pop in yet?
I think for
I
this,
don't see anything yet. So
it would be good to get apartment numbers. Okay, I found 8
Awesome.
emails.
Yeah, I'm seeing some resources and links in the chat. Very cool.
great.
Discussing community access map, types of social interactions, focusing on end goals and social relationships. Very cool. And loving the resource sharing in chat too. That's always great to see.
Great, thank you. Thank you for doing that. If you have any other thoughts in the last 5 minutes before we close up, please share that. I just want to very briefly talk about communicating with residents, especially skeptics. Came out of last session, where people talked about how do we talk to people who are skeptical about being engaged, skeptical about dealing with the climate crisis, et cetera. But one thing to notice is that facts, figures, and scientific data don't convince many people, because most decision-making with humans are based on emotions and mental models. That is the deeply held assumption and beliefs we hold. So believing is seeing. What I already believe is what I see. So instead, share your own personal experiences with others and ask about their lives and experiences and what they are concerned about and focused on. And then search for common ground. Is there anything you have in common between their perceptions, their lives, et cetera, and what you have? And focus how the things that you both care about and are both affected by hotter temperatures, storms, floods, et cetera, et cetera. And you just avoid the term climate change, global warming, climate-ecosystem-biodiversity crisis, et cetera, because for many of it's too abstract. You know, it's atmospheric issue. What does that have to do with me? It doesn't resonate with people. And instead, if you want to talk about that, use the term like extreme weather events, the environmental changes, disasters, natural process, et cetera. Find out what resonates with them and then connect that with things in their own world. And remember that seeing is believing. So when you engage residents in activities that actually address practical issues that they care about and help build their resilience, regenerate local conditions, to prevent harm to them, their family, friends, neighbors, et cetera, that's a very powerful way to surmount differences. You don't have to get into facts and figures. You just solve practical issues that they care about. And when people engage and see progress, it builds understanding of, oh, I get it now, which then it provides a virtuous cycle of wanting to engage more. So there's more information about all these 5 protective factors in a handbook we hand out on the 5 foundational protective factors that are given to all transformation resilience coordinating networks, and more information about how to weave those protective factors into a public health strategy. It will also be found in the Handbook for Emerging Transformational Resilience Coordinating Networks. All prospective Transformational Resilience Coordinator will receive these after they get a steering committee together. So I just want to close by talking about our UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative to help form and operate these TRCNs. If you are interested in forming a Resilience Coordinating Network, we will apply on our website, and you'll be designated as a prospective network. We'll give you a handbook that I just described with lots of information about how to organize a steering committee, create a vision, etc. Provide you technical assistance if you have questions by email or phone, and involve you in a community practice that meets monthly now, and will begin to meet in different ways to help you organize a steering committee. Once you have a steering committee involved, we will designate you, if you're interested, as an emerging Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network, which means that your steering committee is formed and it now wants to develop this strategy, a public health strategy to build population level mental wellness and resilience in the community. We'll provide you with a different handbook that just focuses on those issues, technical assistance involved with you in the community practice to help you develop that multi-sectoral strategy. And once your resilience network has a strategy in place or it's almost ready, we'll invite you to become a commissioned Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network. And we'll provide you a third handbook that describes how to implement strategies, continually evaluate them, improve them, etc., as well as technical assistance and involve you in a community practice to help you implement and continually improve your strategy. So just a quick summary of today's points. There are many ways that TRCNs can help residents begin to heal their trauma. Each community's got to choose one that meets their own needs and culture. But really, what these multi-sectoral resilience networks need to do is use a multidisciplinary approach to develop multi-systemic strategies that deal with many issues at once, to engage residents in strengthening existing protective factors and forming additional ones. Engaging residents in this kind of process, strengthening assets, is far more powerful and more effective than trying to eliminate deficits and treat symptoms of pathology. And engagement in real life pro-social activities with others in the natural environment will help many people find meaning, purpose, and hope in life and heal their traumas. And by organizing these TRCNs in your neighborhood or your community, you can do this. We can make this happen. This is the most effective way to do that. I want to remind you of the 1-hour open house on Thursday, February 13th that I first talked about. The same time as this one, from 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And there's no agenda. You just have a chance to meet other people, talk, just an open-ended thing. So mark your calendar for that, and we'll send you a reminder before that. I just want to remind you again to always remember that community is medicine. And by organizing Transformational Resilience Coordinating Networks in neighborhoods and communities, we can do this now, again, for the climate-ecosystem-biodiversity crisis. So we invite you to join the movement. If you want to apply to organize a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network, go to this website you see there, and we'll send this out afterwards. I think Christian just posted in chat. And we look forward to working with you on this very important project. So thank you for joining us. I hope you will consider forming a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network. And if so, we look forward to really working with you on that. Thank you kindly. And I wish all of you all the best and have a good day. Take care.